Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar between Tangent and Contentful. I'm delighted today to be joined by Andy Everdale from Tangent. And my name is Charlie Bell, and I'm the Senior Director for Solutions Engineering with Contentful here in EMEA. We've got a packed agenda today, but I'm going to first allow Andy to introduce himself, and then we'll get started.
Thanks, Charlie. Pleasure to be here. As Charlie said, I'm Andy. I'm the technical director here at Tangent. So I work with lots of enterprise clients to build fit-for-purpose solutions, and we've been partnering with Contentful for a long time. So it's an honor to be invited to this. Thank you.
So we have two techies on the call today. Let's try and not get too down in the weeds, but let's go back to the start. The title of this webinar is we're going to be looking at the move from monolith to composable and what that really means. But let's start right at the beginning. Let's talk about monoliths and how they came about and why people bought them. Do you want to give some thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Well, I guess the monolith was the start of my career as well. When I first got into web development, the monolith was the standard approach to all web development projects, be it a CMS or, a custom built application. I think you've seen the rise of big content platforms and successful platforms like Sitecore, Episerver, now Optimizely, or Adobe AEM. And 5 years ago, these were the go-to market leaders for enterprise solutions. But technology's moved on since then, and these giants are starting to lag behind. And we found now that the monolith is I don't want to say deaf to the monolith because it has some purpose, but we're seeing a large move away from monolithic applications, big clunky CMSs, large license fees, etc. So maybe these big players have me to say.
Maybe, but I think you're right. And when we talk about monoliths in the context of a monolith, there were the platforms that originally conceived as content management systems way back. I think Episerver was first. I think they came along in 1997 with their platform, and they were conceived as these content platforms. And then over time, of course, things were added. So personalization were added.
Yeah.
Added A/B testing, some analytics, and additional marketing functionality was added onto the platform to bring a bit more of that marketing need, satisfy the marketing needs in the platform, but also I think to bring differentiation to the platforms themselves in the market. So Adobe differentiating from Sitecore, differentiating from Episerver, from Drupal, and all the monolith players. So I think the interesting point that we find ourselves at is that all of the monoliths, as you say, have they've been around for a long time, and they are they're kind of well established in the marketplace. But fundamentally, the original thinking around that technology is 25 years old, 26 years old.
Yeah.
And the way that my view on that is that the thinking has remained relatively unchanged in those 25 years. So either one of two things happened. The guys who originally architected those CMS solutions got it 100% right, and it's never needed to change. Or there is a shift change going on in the marketplace right now where content is being thought about differently. And I think the honest answer is that it sits somewhere in the middle. I think that the guys the people who came up with the original CMS concepts, they did actually understand that bringing content into one place and constructing experiences was the way to go. But fundamentally, the way that people now interact with content has changed, and that's where we see the monoliths starting to, I think, feel a bit dated in the marketplace in terms of their offering.
No, 100%. I think it probably makes sense to describe what we talk about in terms of a monolithic application as well. In terms of a CMS, it means a single application where all of your front end views and logic are in there. All of your integrations are built into there. All of your data structures are built into a single application. And if you wanted to add something, you'd add like a new class to that application or a new bit of a functionality to that application. And over time, these made these huge behemoth, hard to wheel applications where your upgrade paths would be really painful or change would be really hard to action. So we hear lots of people coming to us saying, we've got this huge monolithic application building X, Y, or Z. And we've got to this point now where we just can't action change or include new functionality without there being a long development tail. We can't get features to market quickly. And I think, these applications were built and they were probably amazing on the day they released the MVP of those. But over time, adding to those monoliths have really slowed down a lot of organizations. And hence, this is a common problem that lots of people are seeing, right? And hence you've had the dawn of Composable and some of the advantages of new architecture approaches that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's I think we've kind of talked about monolith. I had a lot of love for monoliths. I worked for a monolith company, content platform for a number of years, and we had a lot of successful projects. It wasn't all doom and gloom, but I think what we're talking about specifically today is that times have changed and the way that people approach technology has changed, and you've introduced it beautifully there. So let's go on and talk about then. So what is this? What's this composable thing? It's a word that a lot of people are talking about, and we techies are brilliant at slapping labels on things and hoping that people understand. But let's just take a little half step back and figure, and talk about what is composable.
Well, what it means is rather than having a single application that everything's all chucked in together like a monolithic application, you take bits of functionality out into their own discrete applications that are unique, and you can create composable services. And there's a Gartner-ism for this, which is DXC, digital experience composition, which starts to introduce things like microservices or applications with unique responsibilities. So they can be interchangeable, interoperable. So say, for example, you have a particular microservice and it has a contract to send some data to a CRM. If you wanted to change your CRM out in the old days in a monolithic application, that might mean rebuilding a large part of your application, be really painful. Here, you can just change a single service and it will still respect all the other services and work as part of a bigger system. So it's giving lots of people huge amounts of flexibility. And it also doesn't have to be a big bang. You can start introducing these very piecemeal. And like you could have your monolithic application, take one piece out of it into its own application, and hey presto, you've already started on your composable journey.
Yeah. Do you know what I did the other day? I looked up the dictionary definition of composable, and it broke it down, and I think the dictionary broke it down really well. It said it's something that's made up of components. So when you start to look at it in those terms, you take the word composable and you break it down, you end up with something that is components working together. And you mentioned there something which I think is quite important, that interoperability. One of the other things that we see alongside the word composable is the word Mach. So we see composable and Mach, and we see Mach Alliance and Mach architectures and whatever. Maybe we could talk a little bit about how Mach architectures embrace the composable story and how they actually enable that composable story and allow people to take a common approach to implementing their MarTech stacks.
No, absolutely. And Mach is a group of organizations, while the Mach Alliance or the Mach culture is a group of organizations that share the same values about composable delivery of systems. Mach itself stands for microservices, APIs, cloud native, and headless, right? I think I got that right. So first of all, we've kind of already touched on the microservices part, I guess, by splitting your applications up into lots of different services. That's the first principle of Mach, so composable systems. The next is taking API first approaches. So these services, be it sort of a custom built service you've built or like a SaaS product, they'll communicate with each other over APIs. And it's about taking API first approaches. And that gives us that interoperability we talked about before. As long as you can adhere to those contracts, you can swap things out. And you give yourself huge flexibility in the market, and also allows you to make change much easier. The next is cloud native, and this is kind of like a big movement at the moment as well. That's really kind of helped power composable into the next sort of realm. So the Cloud Native Compute Foundation is an independent organization that gets lots of different products and projects from organizations such as Google or Red Hat, for example, and they donate lots of products to the Cloud Native Compute Foundation. And the biggest one, and the one everyone knows, is Kubernetes, which is donated by Google to the CNCF. And Kubernetes means it's a modern way of hosting infrastructure where you have resiliency built in from the off. Infrastructure will automatically recover, so you have like huge amounts of like stable. It gives you stable systems, gives you resiliency, also allows you to scale your microservices to meet certain needs. So it's a modern way of creating containerized applications. I feel like I'm going around a techie path here. To like scale your microservice architecture. And then lastly is headless. And I think you're probably much more qualified to talk about headless than I am. But
yeah, headless experiences is something that we have we've seen, it's been growing over time, and the way that I see it is that headless is a byproduct of everything that you've just talked about. It's not a bolt-on, add-on thing that you can take and add to a monolithic platform and say, well, we're now headless because we've attached a bunch of APIs. I think if you adhere to good architectural principles in terms of Contentful, if you have good architectural principles in the way that you build your platform, headless is the inevitable side effect of that, or the outcome of that. So, we are a microservices, by a microservice, it means that you're calling into the platform to get specific pieces of content, and it delivers them in a super light way using APIs, as you say, and we are a cloud native platform. And as a result of that, the platform is scalable, as you said, it's resilient. We have, as Contentful, we've delivered multiple, Black Fridays, Cyber Mondays, January sales, product launches, anything that you can throw at Contentful, it will definitely handle that. And then the way that it's delivered is via these headless experiences, and those themselves bring on specific benefits, I think, around how you can cache them, you can put them out into content delivery networks, and that increases various things like security, because your pages aren't being called from a server every time. So things like SQL injection and all the old tricks that the pranksters get, that maybe sugarcoating that a little bit, but people with ill will throw at websites. So and that's the Mac side of things. So it is we do see the monolith players talking a lot about headless now, because obviously they will. They talk about that because they say, hey, we're headless. We've now got APIs where you can build your platforms. But I think for me, the bit that's missing is the other parts. It's the microservices. It's API first, and that's important. That word first is very important, because it's built. Our platform, of course, is built as an API first platform, where the only way you can get content out of the platform is to use the APIs. So yeah, we've done a little bit of a geek out there, but what it
felt good though, right?
Yeah, it was good though. It was good. It was cathartic. I think we've got it off our chest, so now we can focus on the other stuff. So, but what about companies saying, how do we approach this composable thing? Because one of the things that we see quite often is people come to us and go, we need to talk about composable, we need to talk about Mac. And the thing that we find is that actually a lot of companies are already on that journey. They've already got a platform, an analytics platform. They may have a digital asset management platform that works for them. What do you guys are in the front line, right? You're doing the implementation. Do you see the same thing?
A lot of, all the time, people feel the pressure to suddenly go from 0 to 100 with like composable architectures, because it's what Gartner's talking about, or what the industry press is talking about. But as you said, as we said at the start of the talk, your composable journey isn't like just releasing a big bang. It's a gradual iteration of continual improvements. So you start abstracting from your monolith or your headful products, and to headless architecture, for example, or you take a particular piece of functionality out into its own service, and you've begun. And there's so many good quality products and tools that are already probably working very well for you as part of your existing architecture. It's not the case of ripping it all up and throwing it away. It's about doing a full MarTech review of everything across your MarTech stack, mapping it to reference architectures, looking for duplications or efficiencies or what's working well, what's not working well, not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. If your email marketing service is amazing, continue using it. If you're using MailChimp and you love MailChimp, fantastic. If you're using a DAM system and that's working for you, or your CRM product's fantastic and you've got all of your content in there or contacts in there and it's working globally for you across all your organizations, you don't need to throw it out as part of this review. It's about looking and cherry picking the things that work well, identifying the pain points, looking for duplications so you can start to decrease costs. If you're paying for like multiple DAM solutions, maybe you just need the one, right? If you can get it all in one place, and then aggregating it into a single platform that's easy for you to control. And that introduces the concept of DXP, which is something that Contentful does very well.
Yeah, we do talk a lot. One of the things that we run into quite often when we talk to new customers or people who are interested in our platform is they say, I'd love to really streamline my content processes. I'd love to get more efficiency from my content, but the challenge I face is that as an operational business, I think this comes back a little bit to the old monolith story. As our operational business, I've realized that my content doesn't exist in one thing. It doesn't necessarily make any sense for us as a business to have this old linear view of content where, we put everything into a CMS, we do some drag and drop, and then some web pages drop out to the other end. That was great 15 years ago, 10 years ago, when we were doing mostly brochureware. But now we have a complex ecosystem of tech platforms. As you've already mentioned, there will be commerce in there. There will be digital assets in there. There will be analytics. There'll be personalization. There'll be customer data platforms or CDPs. And so content in the real world exists in this, what I would say is a supply chain, where I suppose the simplest way of illustrating that is if you take a typical product page on any website that you want to think of, you'll have that product image, and then next to it, you'll have the product description. Now, those two pieces of content have completely different life cycles. The product image has probably been taken in a studio. It's then gone to an art desk to be retouched and had, and highlights or whatever. It's then made its way into a digital asset management system where it will sit, and there'll be variants made for different media. So you'll have your print version, you'll have your web version, you'll have a mobile version, and then finally the description of that piece of content or that product will be written by someone entirely different who will do it probably in a content management system. And it's about joining those together. And we have a great customer, Rapha, who do the cycling gear and all the technical products. They're a phenomenal company, and that was the challenge. It's exactly the challenge they faced, and they said, well, we've got this complex ecosystem of content where we have this huge community of cyclists, and that's driving that community with fresh content is one of our key challenges. But also connecting that with the commerce side of things and with the products that we want to feature on our website is also something that we need to be able to do. So that's the reality of the world, is that people come to us. And I just wanted to pick up on one point you said. It's not a boom or bust thing. And I think people are kind of nervous coming to the market and going, I'm facing a massive upgrade on my monolith. I'm facing a new renewal of my license, and the cost has gone up, and I'm only using the content part of it. But for me, it feels too daunting to rip and replace the whole thing. But what you said, which I think was quite interesting, and we see every single implementation of Contentful, is that you can take the old monolith as a source of your new content platform. You plug it into Contentful and start to migrate the content over time. So it's not a rip and replace, boom or bust, all or nothing type approach. There are incremental ways of doing that, and maybe you have some good ideas or some good commentary on your own customers.
Absolutely. We conducted a large headless migration for UK power networks. I don't know if you guys know them, but they are the infrastructure provider for the power network for the southeast of the UK and London. They were on Sitecore. They had incredibly high license fees and infrastructure costs. You know, their production infrastructure alone was £30,000 to £40,000 just for the production environments to host all the Sitecore content delivery services and Solar. And I'm going techie again, but it feels good. And the databases, Sitecore licenses were also, you know, hundreds of thousands of pounds a year. So they had big costs, and their upgrade path was slow. It was hard. They had the external dams. We talk about the Martech infrastructure and bring it all together in a single platform. They were using DigiSuite, the dam, and some other third-party tools, and they had Dynamics and all this kind of stuff together. We conducted a project or a migration for them that was very peaceful. It's a gradual process. As we started sprint teams. We identified parts of the monolith that we could abstract to de-risk the legacy Sitecore implementation, and we started abstracting them into their own APIs or into their own enterprise API that we hosted for them for migrating fully headless. And the old Sitecore platform, as well as the costs they saw in terms of like the platform, they also had big stability issues. So these guys have relatively normal BAU traffic, but in the event of a storm, lots of people log on to the website to report power cuts, and you suddenly see these huge spikes in traffic. Like during Storm Eunice, I don't know if you remember that, it's when the roof came off the Millennium Dome. The website had 3.2 million unique users in 2 days. So it was big traffic, and they're all very targeted in certain times of the day as well. So we saw some huge spikes in traffic, and the Sitecore instance wouldn't be able to cope with it. It couldn't cope with it because there was no shield between it. With a monolithic application, all of that traffic hits a content delivery server, and that has a certain amount of resource. And when that runs out, you know, you get very slow performances or potentially even downtime on it. Right. So by going composable and like using headless, the power of the platforms like Contentful give us, we took a different architectural approach to solve a whole bunch of problems for them. Cost, performance, loads, how quickly we could get change to market, and also sustainability became a requirement we started looking at as well. And we took a different approach. We took a Jamstack approach, which is another acronym, and I do apologize, but it will be the last, I hope, which stands for JavaScript's APIs and markup. And it's back to that cloud native thing, and it links into the Mac through it being API first. But it means that rather than every request hitting your monolith application and it returning a HTML page that it kind of clunks together every time, you're obviously going to have caching policies and stuff like that. You pre-render the HTML. So you only create it once, and you store it on a content delivery network on a CDN or in a product like Vercel, for example, which the creators of Next, which is one way of doing this pre-rendering of HTML, or static site generation it's called. And that means suddenly you don't need all of that infrastructure to host Sitecore. It can all be distributed on a CDN. You can handle huge volumes of traffic as well, like astronomical volumes of traffic. We were testing to 40,000 concurrent users on the platform. Wow. And it was still fine, and we could have gone further, but you just end up spending a lot of money in load tests and infrastructure bills to do it. And to frame that, google.co.uk, the search button, has roughly 30,000 concurrent users. That's a user in a single millisecond clicking the button. Yeah. So like it handles, we're talking big traffic here. Yeah. Because it's all pre-rendered on a CDN, the sky's the limit in terms of traffic. Cost as well was slashed by 66%. The project actually paid for itself. The migration project paid for itself in 3 years of the cost savings for infrastructure and license fees. We also saw that we could get change much quicker to market. So now we could be fully agile, and developers could work on a unique service in parallel rather than all trying to work on the same monolith and it being hard to deploy change. You can have teams of developers working on individual services, and we could get change out incredibly quick compared to what it was before.
Yeah, I I heard, I was at the Mach 2 conference in Amsterdam a few weeks ago, and I think it was the guy from Puma, the sportswear company,
Yeah.
who's up, and he said, as a digital leader, when I talk about ROI, I talk to my stakeholders about ROI as rate of innovation, which I thought was brilliant, because
Yeah.
a lot of people are saying, you touched upon it there, the power networks guys, they got a return on their investment within 3 years. And that's the sort of metrics that people like. But I think the real change, the real shift change that businesses and marketing teams and people on the front line who are actually doing the day-to-day is they want to see that rate of innovation. So we should probably move on to sort of our final section where we talk about, well, how do I get started? But I wanted to seed the move into the next section by talking about a conference I went to. It was a supplier conference for one of the UK's biggest high street retailers, and they said that they're on their fourth wave of digital transformation, and they've only just kind of got it pointing in the right direction. You must speak to a lot of people, and I speak to a lot of people who said, we did our digital transformation 5 years ago and it didn't do what we wanted it to do. Let's talk about waves. Let's talk about people coming in and doing incremental improvements, taking a Contentful, putting it in their marketing technology stack, and then getting the increments. How do you start? How do you approach this as a digital leader, as a business leader? What's the first conversation to have?
I think the first conversation is never about the solution or the current stack or technology or wanting to move to DXC or DXP. And the first conversation is really understanding what that business's KPIs are. So what drives revenue for them? What's important for them as an organization? What things should the platform be doing? Is it converting sales? Is it like getting potential leads? Is it reporting power cuts? Is it selling spandex bikewear? Is it whatever, right?
That's a blast from the past.
Yeah, you can tell I'm not a biker. Lycra. Yeah. We can cut that bit out in the post-production.
No, I think we should leave it in.
Yeah. But the important thing is really understanding those KPIs, and then you start on an iterative path of continual improvement, and you measure yourself against those KPIs. You don't try and rip off the whole Band-Aid in one piece and try and do it all at once, because that's when you end up with these failed transformations projects where it's like everyone's expectations or expectations of the platform aren't met. So by getting some agreed KPIs up front and starting slow iterative improvements and measuring your change against those KPIs is how you get started. So before you look at any of the products or tech or anything, it's about really nailing down what you want it to do.
Yeah,
what you want.
I agree. And another thing that we talk about, and the reason that we have these conversations and we're having this type of conversation today is we talk about finding a trusted advisor. We do one thing well. We do content and we manage content, and we have a content platform that connects sources of content together. I think a lot of the suite vendors, the traditional and monolith suite vendors, they come to the table with a bunch of things and say the only way you can solve your problems is to buy all of these things and connect them all together, because we get them to work together. And I think there's a degree of I'm not going to say the word arrogance, I think that's wrong, but I think there is a degree of misguidedness, I think, in thinking that the only way to solve this is to replace everything. But oftentimes we see people who have come to us and they say, well, I've got a DAM system, I've got a binder, I've got Cloudinary, and actually that works quite well for me. And I've got a CDP over here, maybe Telium or something that works quite well for me. The Twilio segment is another great one. So how can I get a solution that keeps those things that we like, but actually builds us a more progressive solution? So, and that's where we say, well, speak to Tangent, speak to those guys, because they know how to connect these things together, because incremental improvements and measuring, as you said, the KPIs, understanding what the outcome is going to be, what do you have that works, where do you want to get to, that for us is a far more progressive conversation. It's an easy, and often you can almost see people exhale the pressure that, you know, if I open up a conversation with my vendor, it's traditionally been, well, you need to buy more. But we come to the table and say, let's take a look at what you've got. Let's see how we can connect these things together. And we already touched upon it a little bit earlier, is that people they're on that composable journey, and what they want is a comfort, and they want to know that it's not going to cost them, you know, 15 million over the next 5 years, and fingers crossed it might work, that they can do those incremental, progressive, and coming back to the high street retailer, fourth wave of digital transformation, and they're now starting to see where they're headed. That's, I mean, I've talked a little bit there, but I think you guys are at the coalface in terms of things like that. And do you see the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. All the time, the people think there's this expectation to come in and have to do the whole thing at once, but there really isn't. And taking that progressive approach certainly helps. The good thing about something like Contentful as well is once you do that review of the current stack, if there's products that are working with there's so many integrations already out the box with Contentful that you can get. You haven't got to build everything from scratch. So suddenly you can integrate with the likes of Twilio, Segment, or Binder through the existing marketplaces and plugins. It's already been done. So you can you can, again, about getting, or talk about rate of innovation and getting to market quickly. That's something that Contentful allows you to do. You have an incredibly flexible product. You can model the content exactly how you need to for your particular business solution. And that leads back to that API first point. That gives you then structured APIs that can then provide content to your entire MarTech landscape, be it whatever, your main site or a web app or mobile app or whatever it might be. Yeah. And then when you look at your downstream integrations and your MarTech stack, there's so many existing integrations already with Contentful that you can hit the ground running.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose the other thing that we see a lot is, and it's an interesting concept. I was speaking to a friend of mine the other day, and he was saying every tech vendor sees themselves as the center of the universe. And I don't think, and I say that with a great amount of self-awareness, and I'm perfectly aware that content drives all of digital experience. You can't have personalization without content. You can't have A/B testing without content. You can't do email campaigns without content. And so we tend to see ourselves as the center of the universe. But actually, I think when we speak to customers, they may see another thing as the middle of their platform. And that may be, for example, commerce. They'll see commerce as the driving force behind their platform. So again, coming back to that trusted advisor thing, we work with people like you to go in and understand the tech landscape, and where does the customer see the driving force behind their digital experiences, and then how does content come in and support that, and it sometimes it isn't the center of the universe, but it is serving in the content that delivers the experiences to customers. So that's another thing that I think we're becoming acutely aware of as well, is that we're not the center of everyone's universe, but we certainly help power it. Mm-hmm. So we're at time. We've had a great chat. What would be next steps? What would you suggest that customers, they've listened to us talk, they understand that starting with the conversation is the best way to do this. What about next steps? How would we get in touch?
Well, I think it's complicated, right? And it's a daunting process. You can either get in contact with us straight away, and obviously we'd love that. You can reach out to us through our websites or grab any of us on LinkedIn. That would be great. If you want to do some more research and you want to get your head around some of the terms we talked first and arm yourself for these conversations, not that you need to, by the way, because we'll hold your hand through the whole process. We've written a white paper on composable architectures, the benefits for marketers, the benefits for people in operations, and also technical benefits. And it's split into those three sections that will give you clear business cases for whatever your role is. So I think the QR code will be appearing on the screen now. You'll be able to download it through the QR code.
Yeah, that's great. And obviously we'll have our LinkedIn details on the page at the end as well. So feel free to connect with me or Andy. So again, it's been a fascinating conversation. I think we've walked a very kind of long journey there in the last 30 minutes, where we talked about the as is or as was state, where people are starting to feel that they need to move on. The considerations around composable. What is it? What should I be daunted? Is it a big concept? And I hopefully, for the audience today, that you and I have collectively laid quite a lot of that trepidation, I think, to rest a little bit. So we, have a conversation. It's not an all or nothing thing. It can be progressively improved. We talked a lot about rates of innovation. And then finally, I think the most important bit that we talked about at the end was we talked about starting with the customer. Start with what is it that you want to deliver as a business out to your end users? What do you want the experience to look like, and how do you get there? And identify in your middle, where is it that you want to place the most emphasis in terms of your customer experience? What do you have that works? Let's come to the table and say, look, we have this, it's already working well for us. How do we connect it together to deliver brilliant user experiences? I'm sure we could have filled another half hour of talking about this, but it's been fascinating to talk to you today. It's been a really great conversation. I like these webinars where we just chat and we just talk about cool stuff. And so if you want to reach out to Andy or I, you want to talk about content, you want to talk about your digital transformation projects, your ongoing digital transformation, please do. But in the meantime, thank you for joining, Andy, and thank you to the audience for being with us today.
Cheers, Charlie. Thank you.
Cheers.